the second part of our historic homes tour today. We are eager to take you through one of the first original homes here on this property that Elizabeth Ann Seton moved into in 1809. So I am working with the same crew as I did before. We have Liz that will be right behind the camera taking those awesome images of the space.
And I'm Carolyn. I work in communications here at the Shrine. I'll be off camera answering any questions or asking any of the questions that come in. So anytime throughout the tour, if you have questions, please feel free to leave a comment and we'll do our best to get to them. And I'll leave it to Bridget.
Yes. Thank you, Carolyn. Sorry, I totally forgot to introduce myself. I'm expecting return viewers today, so if we have new one, we welcome you. My name is Bridget, and I am the Education Program Manager here at the Seton Shrine. So in 1807, Elizabeth Ann Seton received an invitation from the first Catholic Bishop of the United States, John Carroll, to move to Baltimore and start a school. About a year after she moved to Baltimore, she received another opportunity to relocate again and establish another school, as well as establish the first homegrown community of Catholic sisters that will leave a legacy for years to come, following the footsteps of Mother Seton and serving in various ministries across the United States and other countries. And it really did all start in this house. This is the stone farmhouse that was built in 1750 and situated at about 269 acres of farmland and forestry. Mother Seton moved in here on July 31st of 1809 after spending about 6 weeks up at the mountain about 2.5 miles from here, which we now call Mount St. Mary's University and Seminary. They would have trekked down off the mountain about every day, like over the creek, which had no bridge, by the way, often getting lost very early on during their first arrival here in Emmitsburg. And it wasn't until much later they started making pathways because there was no road or sidewalks like we know today. So this is the native stones from the Catawba Mountain, and Mother Seton had done some renovation prior to moving in. So you guys can go right on into the first permanent home, which is where 16 in total had lived in for 7 months. And they only had 3 rooms to move about. So the first room that you're seeing here is the main foyer gathering space for the sisters and the students. She moved in here again on July 31st of 1809 and formally founded the Sisters of Charity of St. Joseph. In her small company was her 3 daughters, her 2 sisters-in-law that followed her from New York, Harriet and Cecilia Seton, 2 students from the school in Baltimore, and the rest were the 8 original sisters forming the Sisters of Charity of St. Joseph's. So the part of the renovation that they were working on for the 6 weeks in June going into July was a small chapel area, which is where the sisters would have gathered and begin their day in prayer. They would also have Mass in here as well. It is a very tiny space, and we do believe that all 16 of them would have squeezed in together, with maybe perhaps her children and the students taking to the floor. Now, when they were first in here, it was during the summer going into fall, where it was nice weather and probably cool at times. And there was no glass in the windows. So they invited friends from the community to join them to have Mass or to pray. Most likely those that joined them would have stayed out in the area that we were just in, or they would stand right outside of the house and listen through the windows. Because like I said, there was no glass during the times that they were here. So the next space that we're going to go into that was part of the renovation was to create a small bedroom for Elizabeth Ann Seton and her daughters. Her three daughters, Rebecca, Catherine, and Anna Maria, who was the oldest, would have slept on the floors and then in the morning rolled up their cots and put it in the cupboard. So that way they can utilize the space for everyday use. As you know, 16 people is quite crowded in this very tiny house. Not quite sure what the square footage is. Now, as winter started becoming upon them, things got a little bit more, well, they started entering into more of a hardship. Sickness really came down upon the community. Harriet Seton, who was her sister-in-law, was one that fell gravely ill, and Mother Seton gave up her bed so that way they had the comfort of the bed. This really was the only bed that was brought to the house.
So we do have a question here from Helen. Helen asks, from where geographically did the original 8 sisters come from?
Geographically, well, that is a great question. We believe some of them were from actually Baltimore themselves or from Philadelphia. I'm not sure if one of them came from New York. I do apologize on not being able to be solid on that information. And that was actually 6 sisters that traveled from other places to join Mother Seton and followed her from Baltimore to Emmitsburg. And then 2 more joined her that were actually local sisters. They were blood sisters named Ellen and Sally Thompson. And they were from Emmitsburg, born and raised. And when Mother Seton moved into this house, again, on July 31st of 1809, that's when Sally and Ellen had moved in with them, consisting of really 9 sisters, because Mother Seton, even though she reclaimed the title of mother, she was considered a sister of charity. Well, speaking of the sisters though, so we have this bedroom, we have a chapel, and then we have like more of a foyer family space. Where did the others sleep? They actually slept upstairs in the garret. There was a very narrow staircase that was in the corner of this house over here. These are replicas. They're not the original stairwell that was of Mother Seton's time. However, I'd like to confirm that this is the original house that was restored and preserved. So again, it was only these 3 rooms that they lived together for 7 months, from July to February 20th of 1810. Because it was during the time they were living here, Mother Seton knew that this was not a practical space. So they started building on to the next house, which was our very first historic homes tour, St. Joseph's House, as we call today the White House. So finally moved out, taking all that they have had on them, and moved up for the remainder of Elizabeth Ann Seton's life. Now, in 1834, not really quite sure if that's the more accurate year, but there was an expansion done onto the stone farmhouse. So if there's no questions, we're going to go ahead and move on. Now, if I had in-person visitors, I would say, please watch the head on the ceiling here. But we're going to follow the camera. I am going to give you guys a nice view, a very unique, special opportunity that we do not offer to our public. And I am going to show you what happened around 1834. These stairs dates of 1834, so that's the year we believe perhaps the addition was done under the governance of Mother Rose White, who was the second elected superior for the Sisters of Charity of St. Joseph's community. She took on this project where she lifted the rooftop from the original house and expanded it out for a second floor. And we believe the space was probably used for additional beds, like for sisters or students or maybe their guests. But the space I really would like you to see is right over to what was the original garret space. Again, the 8 sisters, the 2 students, and probably her sister-in-laws all slept up here. They had 2 cots that was received from the seminary. The rest had slept on mattresses. Anyone that was ill, Mother Seton tried to give her bed to them for more comfort. However, towards the end of their time here in the stone house, there was a lot of illnesses. So they would take turns on the cot. There is one story I want to share where they had, like I said, there was no glass in the windows. They had to use the shutters to try to keep the cold air out and the warm air in. And they would put probably like oil paper in the cracks of the shutters to really try to keep any inclement weather out. And there was one account that was written, I believe by Sister Rose White. Again, yes, this is the same sister that was the next elected mother for the community. She wrote that one morning they woken up to be covered in snow, and then her and Sister Sally had to shovel out almost 2 cartloads of snow out the window. So I can't even imagine having to wake up like that in the coldness.
So we do have another question, and for all those who are just tuning in, please feel free to ask any questions you have at any time throughout the tour in the comments, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. Anne is curious about whether or not there are plans for the space to be renovated.
Unfortunately, at this time, we do not have any plans. Again, this is almost a 300-year-old house. While the main space has been renovated and preserved, as well as the upper space has been preserved structurally, we are not sure if we're able to utilize the space for further interpretation. But I'm so glad to be able to show you this sneak peek, because we do want to preserve the 1834 steps, so the traffic that will going up and down these steps will really be detrimental to such an old staircase that is worth keeping.
And we have another question that just came in from Laura. She asked, why did they not have glass in the windows?
Again, I think that it was an old stone farmhouse that was occupied on 269 acres. We do not believe that the family of which owned the property was actually living in the house. Hence, that's why Mother Seton wanted to do some minor reservation to make it more livable. But I believe that Mother Seton never intended it to be a long-term situation, so they probably did not invest any more finances into the home than necessary. So it might have been a choice to make do and was striving for a much larger home, which is the historic St. Joseph House. On days where there was a lot of illnesses, those that were well, Mother Seton did send those sisters up to St. Joseph House because, again, it was built in stages, so whatever room was actually completed and gave sufficient shelter, those sisters would have slept up there. There is another account where the sisters shared that because they were up at the St. Joseph's house that was across the field, they actually did not have any sense of time. So as I mentioned at the beginning, in the chapel, that was where they would begin their day in prayers, waking up probably about 4:30 to be together at 5 a.m. And so these sisters that were up at St. Joseph's house, they would wake up, run across the field, and run into the thing, worried that they were late for prayers or mass, only to turn out it were probably only 2 a.m. and they have woken the whole household up.
So we have another question. Maybe we can answer it as we head down the steps. Helen is asking about how was Mother Seton and her sisters financially supported? Did they have donations or financial assets?
That is a wonderful question, and actually we're just getting ready to segue down into that. So as the camera is making their way down the stairs, once he gets to the main level, the space that we are looking into will be a space that was utilized most likely for sewing. During Mother Seton's time, she established a business relationship with the seminaries as a source of income for the sisters in the community. Other ways are probably, again, financing the community is through the academy, of which she officially founded in 1810 when she moved to St. Joseph's House after being here in the stone farmhouse. And I do recommend either looking back at our previous historic homes tour, first one done a couple weeks ago, or perhaps tune into on the next one. We may do another St. Joseph's House tour. So there was multiple ways that they tried to encourage some sort of financial support through the academy. But the biggest thing is Mother Seton had really nice relationships, especially within the Catholic Church community. They supported her ministry, they supported the work, and they were here for her as much as they possibly could. So again, I think one known way of income was for a fee, they would have washed and sewed and mended the seminarian clothes. However, they did not actually make all the fabric. They still had fabric purchased for the community and brought here to Emmitsburg, probably from New York or Baltimore, so it was imported. But we do know that they had worked on the loom and did some spinning, so most likely they did make their own like altar cloth, napkins, hankies, like very simple household items. Now the addition, I do believe that the main reason why Mother Rose White decided to build onto it is right here in the next room. It's a much larger space. So this is the wash room. We believe that the stone farmhouse that was the first permanent home for Mother Seton and her community then transformed into being a wash house. It was located closer to Tom's Creek, and originally that was where Mother Seton had did a lot of the laundering. They would take their clothes down to the creek, did the laundering for the day, and there was cannot imagine the challenges that came with that, especially when they got caught in a summer thunderstorm or something like that, where they had to lug all the wet clothes up the hill and back into the house so they can properly be dried. But it was definitely a practice that would continue throughout her time and shortly after, because the washing machine in some form really was not invented until the late 1800s. So they were definitely the wash tub with the basin and the scrub brush and the lye soap. Now we do a lot of living history interpretations here. We will talk about the practice of the wash in the early 19th century. We also take the opportunity to interpret the space of baking of the bread. We do know that the sisters did bake their own bread, and most likely because they wanted to bake their communion bread. The practice of receiving the communion is much different in the 19th century to the 21st century. Like today we can attend Mass and we can receive the Eucharist, where back then receiving the Eucharist was a very special time for them. It didn't happen as often as they wanted to.
So we have a question from Nancy, who asked, did the students pay for their education?
Yes. So there were two groups of students. We had the academy, which are boarders that did pay a fee to receive an education. And then you had the free school that were more of poor girls from the area that was sponsored by the Sisters of Charity of St. Joseph. So that is a great question. Now, we did not necessarily teach in this house, but perhaps it was used as an additional classroom space if they needed to, if they just, a sister decided to take her charges and move to a different space to educate them. We do know that the students that were in the free school, which they had often to referred as orphans, would have been pulled from the academic, of which they probably were only taught the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. They did not have like the extracurricular types of subjects as like French or a music lesson and so forth. So those students in the free school sponsored by the sisters would have been pulled out to help with some of the domestic work, such as maybe making some bread or the laundering or sewing or working on a loom. But again, these are all life skills that Mother Seton readily was able to teach them, so that way they can flourish into respectable women in the community when they get older. She definitely provided them an opportunity. Because if she had not been here, who knows to say what kind of education system would have been in place for these girls in the area.
So we have another question, and if anyone has any final questions, get them in as we approach the end of the tour. But we have a question from Anne, who is asking, is the brick floor original?
I do not believe the brick floor is original. There might be a couple original pieces, but in 1979, the house was under a major restoration project for further preservation. So the wood flooring to the brick flooring, we do believe, was redone probably. So it could sustain more of a museum house. So we are coming near the end of this house. It is a short tour versus St. Joseph's House, aka White House. I'm sorry, we do have another question. Okay.
Yes, Connie is asking, does the National Shrine here have a cathedral where Mass is held?
We actually do not have a cathedral. Cathedral is just a name for a type of a building. However, we do have a church, and it is called the Basilica. In fact, it was just last week on Wednesday that we did a Basilica tour. So if you clue into our videos posted on Facebook and our web pages, you can watch that tour and get the full scope of the Basilica here at the National Shrine of Saint Elizabeth Ann Seton.
And we have another question from Helen. Helen, we love how engaged you are with this tour. Helen would like to know, did any of the sisters leave behind journals or letters detailing their experiences through these early years?
Yes, we do have a couple of sisters that did write down their accounts, such as Sister Rose White or Mother Rose White, Sister Xavier Clark, who became a mother. She was the third elected superior for the community, and many more. And there are also some oral traditions that were written down too. But really, a lot of our information is coming from Elizabeth Ann Seton's writing. And you can read them yourself through, again, the collected writings, which is available on our website in PDF form. Just Google collected writings of Elizabeth Ann Seton. Or you can visit our gift shop, where we do have the collected writings as well as other books, especially the biography of her, available.
And we have a question from Modernaire, who is asking, how much did the property originally cost?
Ooh, honestly, I am not well versed in that. So if we ever do the Stone Farmhouse tour again, I am thinking of another docent that could give the tour who definitely knows the answer. But what I do know that there was an agreement of a sum, and there was a time frame in which that it had to be fulfilled, as well as where the money came from. Like, they wanted a specific coin that came from Philadelphia. So, but we'll have to save that story for another time. I apologize, I don't know it very well, but it was a great question. Thank you.
We have a question from Daniel, who is asking, where did they store all of their food?
Oh, just like any house back then, they had a root cellar. So there was definitely a root cellar under the original portion of the house. I'm not sure exactly where the entrance to the root cellar is, but we do know that there was one. Okay. Oh, well, it seems like that's all the questions for today. Again, thank you for coming and tuning in to the tour of the Stone Farmhouse. And again, like I said, this really is probably more of the coming of age of Catholic sisters in the United States. It all started here, and they carried on the legacy of Elizabeth Ann Seton through all their ministries. So hopefully one day when we open back up, you can come in here and see it for yourself in person. You can experience our Living History program. And I think Carolyn had a couple of words too as well.
Yeah, just before you all leave, we want to invite you to our next live stream event, which is May 31st at 6 p.m. EST. Our event will be a live stream blessing of our Seton Legacy Garden. So all of you are more than invited to join us for that. It's a bit of a liturgy of the word in the Basilica, as well as footage of our garden, which you haven't seen yet. So we would love to have you. That's May 31st at 6 p.m.
Thank you. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to let you out this door here. And we hope that we will see you next time.